Welcome, everyone. This is Illiterate. This week, we are covering Prey. I just checked out Prey on Hulu. In fact, I checked it out over and over and over again. I'm hanging out with Taylor.
Hello. I looked into Comanche history far and wide.
Prey is the number one release on Hulu, period, ever, against all of it. And all of it. So it's shocking everybody. No, but if you listened last week, I'm a diehard fan. It's one of my favorite things. I was standing in line down here. They had a 2 screenings of the Comanche dub. I'm sitting here. I can't believe I can say, Taylor, this Predator movie is one of the best movies of the year. And you can't say anything about it. So this is all coming as shock because coming off of last week where we left off, we were teasing the return of the supposed Messiah. Shane Black came to direct the 2018 installment, which Shane Black starred in the original. This was big budget, theatrical rollout, everything they needed, and an incredible cast. I mean, a wild cast, and it's just an unmitigated disaster. From all ends. And there's not a whole lot to say about it, unfortunately, other than as a Predator fan, I walked away going, wow, okay, so the Predator franchise is done for the foreseeable future for the decade. This popped off and exploded in a cinematic way in the late teens in just, in the late teens fashion. I thought, wow, there it went, and it's gone. Predator, bye-bye, and we'll get another shot at this some way down the road.
But behold, here's this one.
We're in a renaissance. Yeah. we're in a Predator renaissance.
So how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, really. And on a cherry on top for anybody who's into this kind of stuff, I just want to throw out there because I'm sucking all this stuff. The Marvel Predator comic book Day of the Hunter, written by Ed Brisson, was released in comic book stores everywhere. Much release delayed because of the Disney lawsuit, which we might talk a little bit later in this episode. But I just can't believe that this has found all this energy. That honestly, this movie I've been thinking about my entire life has come to fruition. And God, man, Taylor, this movie is so detailed. There's so much to go off of. We could start in any direction. But I mean, really, how in the world did we even get this thing?
Yeah. So during the development of Predator 2018, this was being in the works. Dan Trachtenberg is the director and screenwriter. Patrick Ason. They approached the producer of the Predator films with the concept they had been working on, which eventually became shifted around to be this concept. And pretty much the same thing in terms of the log line when it was being developed on its own was codename Skulls. In the Hollywood Reporter, it just said, follows a Comanche woman who goes against gender norms and traditions to become a warrior. Which I think was super cool, but then of course word gets out. The initial intent was to market it with no reference to Predator, and you could do that.
I heard that Amber Midthunder actually went through much of the casting process without knowing the film was a part of the Predator franchise. That she thought that this was a straight out Native American film. Yeah.
Exactly.
And for quite some time. I mean, you do that but they treated it like Star Wars, basically. Which, brilliant, I mean, you're trying to get down to what they got to. Wow. I mean, incredible. And everybody seems to be really embracing her. I just wanted to pull that out real quick.
Yeah, definitely. And that's also what makes it a big deal where you're talking about it's the number one thing. People are loving it. I was looking at the numbers of Native representation by the Hollywood Diversity Report, Films and Television, was between 0.3 and 0.6% has anything to do with or involving Native American people. But in terms of the percentages, 3% of the U.S. population, 14 states have within each of them more than 100,000 Native American or Alaska Native residents. So you'd think there would at least be comparable numbers to the population represented, not such, less than a percent in films and media. So that's also why because it's full cast. And that was the big thing too, is Jane Myers, who is a member of the Comanche and Blackfeet Nation, is a primary producer on this and advisor and consultant.
She was at our screening and read a blessing from the Comanche Nation, in fact.
Mhm.
It was really, really amazing getting to see her present the film because you immediately got the sense, just being in the room with her, that was my first indication of how detailed what I was about to see actually was. Just
Yeah,
her,
definitely.
just being in the room with her, I went, "Oh, is she bringing? She produced this," and now I'm excited. That was
Yeah.
the 30 seconds before the lights went out. So
And that's the big thing that people are talking about is the dub, which means that the spoken word, which they try to line up with the lips, is in Comanche, and we'll get to why that's a bigger deal later on. But just so you know, Amber, who's the main character, auditioned in English and Comanche, and then Jane, when she originally got the script up at the top, it said all dialogue in Comanche, and she's like, "All right, let's go. This is
yes.
great." And so that was the original intent was, we're just gonna do it all, and then they tried, well, it should start with the character speaking Comanche and then switch to English, and that didn't work. So they essentially shot
Mm.
both instead in a way, kind of appeasing probably the variety of producers and
Did you find
production
something saying
entities.
that they actually shot picture in Comanche?
No, 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 they did not, but
Okay,
in
okay,
terms
okay,
of,
okay.
like, yeah,
Gotcha.
releasing
Yeah,
2
got
versions,
sorry.
yeah. No, 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 that's a
Just
good clarification.
effectively,
Yeah,
and that's really what it does. That's what I went to go see,
mhm,
and Dan introduced it as the original intent. This is as close as you get to what we were dreaming up on the page,
definitely.
and just stunning. I mean, I don't want to jump the horse here talking about the dub, but I mean, it's just I think it absolutely elevates everything about the story.
Yeah. So, hold that for a while. I know we're teasing it, but, like,
Yeah.
let's talk we'll get to that. Let's get through some of the other production stuff that was of interest. You had mentioned beforehand for me to look into the stuff with the dog because that was a big deal that people were like, "Oh, we love this dog. Put more dog in."
People have fallen in love with the dog. She's become a meme over the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I had read that the dog role was much smaller initially.
And it was an untrained, not a set film aware dog. It was kind of a hot mess, but when it did the right thing, it was like, "Oh, this is beautiful. Let's put it in more." And
It
so,
it
yeah.
fooled me, man, and it fooled my wife Emily too. I remember because I, as a filmmaker, I have worked with trained animals, and my mom is an obedience dog trainer my
Right,
entire life,
right.
so I'm clued into these kind of stuff. When I was watching the dog on screen, there's a particular shot immediately in the movie where Mid Thunder's character is walking through setting up her village. It's this big, beautiful wonder with all the production design, and the dog is following along, tracking with the camera, and I'm watching the dog and what it's glued into, and I know where the treat is, just because I know how the shot is done. And I'm going, wow, I really like this dog. It has this natural feel to it, but it's doing exactly what it needs to do on the mark. This is a well trained dog. It turns out it's not trained at all.
Yeah, they had to do a lot of takes to get it in the right
Yeah.
places and get it
You
to,
have
yeah.
no idea. I'm looking at it going like, yeah, dogs are really. If you get the right dog, trained dogs, they're awesome.
Yeah. Well, and so I had looked, so the Comanche is an offshoot of the Shoshone tribes in the plains, and they use dogs quite a bit for hauling,
Really?
like bigger, yeah. Until bum, the big thing that they're known for is horses, horseback riding. And so this is
Uh-huh.
some of the historical accuracy stuff. When Jane Myers came on, early drafts of the script didn't have horses anything at all to do, and she's
Oh,
like, "This is a huge discrepancy because the Comanche people, it's one of the first tribes to acquire horses from the Spanish, and that's like
wow.
the entire history of the Comanche revolves around breeding them, fighting on them, dominating in the plains because they are the horseback Native American tribe." And so
That's
that's
actually that
yeah.
impacts the back half of the plot pretty
Mhm.
dramatically in a sense. The two main characters get split up, and one goes after the horses, which comes into play only about 20 minutes later, maybe
Yeah.
less. Yeah, it ends up becoming a big deal at the end, so it makes sense now why he's going for the horses. And yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so they did have dogs
Without Jane,
primarily,
none
and
of
then
that's there. It's just
yeah, yeah. And everybody watching it being like, "Wait, how can you even call them Comanche without horses at all. It makes no sense. Yeah.
I
So she
read that
really had,
Patrick went
yeah,
through a lot of labor on this script and drafts
definitely.
and drafts and drafts and years. And the development on this was started basically as soon as 2018 was done and
Right. So
went
it's like
up all the
5
way to
years.
the
Yeah.
wire.
Hmm.
So I'm imagining all the steps that this went through. I'm looking at it from this end, going like, "Wow, it's so classically put together. It's so economic in the way it's put together. I love how it goes, and it's the product of 5 years of development."
Exactly. And outsource utilizing the people that know anything about the Comanche Nation in the
Right,
early
leaning
1700s.
on your
Like,
resources, absolutely, being the
yeah.
sponge and just being the filter, so everything aligns in one direction.
Well, because Jane Myers was even saying it's like, well, the oldest photos are from the 1790s. So that's decades and decades too far gone. So we have to go back to people that have this history in their homes
Wow,
or in their archives and renderings and what the color swatches are and accurate to the period toothbrushes and all of the little
yeah,
things. Reminded me a lot of Pachinko as well, of
oh yeah.
getting the detail for it all.
Yeah, I mean, you
Especially so,
see her
yeah.
use a toothbrush in it, and you go, "Did they have a toothbrush?" It like presents some of these things. Then some of my questions I sent you, I was just like,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
presents you some of these things so nonchalantly, like whatever she's doing her teeth. But like in my mind, I'm going like, "Wait a minute, she is brushing her teeth. Is that a Comanche toothbrush?" And
Yeah.
so, like, even the notion of a dog, I was interested. And the horse, I actually didn't blink at, but the dog and how heavily it's used, I went, "Oh, did they use horse?" That it just unflinchingly uses this stuff that almost like makes you go, "Wow, did they
Yeah.
really?" Yes, they did.
Yeah. One of the things that you had asked me about for the questioning of it, which I think the cynical people take guff with, of the like, oh, she's a woman trying to do the hunting role and the man's role and all of that. But the point, I think, if you know about Comanche culture, is like that's the point of it. It was a huge
Right.
disparity. It was almost like, for people that know a different culture, like ancient
That's
Sparta,
why
where it
this
was like
story
the,
would be
yeah,
worthy of
yeah,
right.
because the gender roles are hugely divided. Men all took the physical hunter and warrior roles. Women had nothing to do with it. They were the caregiver, home overseer, and there was a ton of split where certain times you couldn't even go into the tent for certain things. And there's like
Wow.
a lot of
Wow.
separation in the culture. That's kind of
Yeah.
like why it's an interesting story, is because,
Yeah,
oh yeah,
exactly.
oh well,
That's
this
why
wouldn't have
it's
happened
worthy of
exactly.
cinema.
Yeah,
That's yeah, that's what like that is the impetus of the story. Otherwise, we've gotten to the like
yeah.
yeah, I'm not gonna. I'm not
One of the things that she does use, and you had asked about the accuracy of that, is this orange flower becomes a big part of
Everybody's talking about the
defeating the predator.
flower.
Yeah, yeah. And there really isn't anything that can hide your body heat to that sort of
Right.
insane degree.
Number 1, like, certainly not as fast as,
Yeah.
they put it in their mouth and, like, 10 seconds later, they're like,
Yeah,
"Look,
yeah.
predator can't see me." But
Yeah.
that's movies. But, like,
Yeah.
yeah, that was my question. I'm going like, so was there anything any precedent for any kind of herb or any kind of thing they
Yeah.
could have had access to that would lower body temperature even minute? I'll walk there. I'll walk there as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, as a creative. Like, oh, just oh yes, this flower lowered your body temperature 3 degrees. I'd be like, perfect, great. That's all I need to. Like, oh, you got it.
The closest
I'm
thing is the, yeah, yeah, is the calendula plant, which orange flower, cousin of the marigold, and it is used in medical purposes for a long time. Stop blood flow from battle wounds. I guess if you want to say the
mm,
heat thing, it was used to help break fevers, but that's more just like you have an elevated temperature and it's to get you back to
mm.
normal. A lot of
That
different medicinal
satisfies me.
uses, but
No, no, no.
stuff like that. Yeah, yeah.
As a writer, totally satisfied.
Fine. Yeah. There's a native North American plant that's an orange flower that kind of does something medical, I guess. Put it in
Right.
the movie. And I guess that the last thing before we get into Comanche and film history is from the film side of things. Like you had said, it's on Hulu. Well, why the heck is this not in theaters then, if it looks like it has
Right.
all this backing behind it and it's representative and unique and, yeah,
Certainly
all
looks
that
like they
stuff.
shot it for theaters.
Yeah.
Every man, that's the number one thing is like typically streaming right now is in this space where things are shot for streaming. You see it. It looks like it's a streaming film. This doesn't even have an ounce of that. This I'm so happy I got to see it on the big screen because that's honestly what they were on set trying to do for it, even though all the while they knew exactly where it was going.
Yeah. I had seen, and there's a number of reasons, but the more technical one that I don't think people consider is this whole Disney buying Fox in 2019, and they had a lot of
Right.
holdover stuff and contracts that they had to keep.
That's classic though.
And
When
yeah,
there's change overhead anywhere really, but certainly classic at the studios. Any projects in development kind of go on hold and they can just be dropped because the new person coming in has new priorities.
yeah. The thing that I had seen was related to some of the contractual stuff and what Fox had already arranged for these things, and so the theatrical agreement that they had made was that it would have gone to HBO Max
Okay.
along with the theatrical, and so why would then
Okay.
Disney boost a
Okay.
rival streaming platform? They're just like, "Well, then we'll just put it straight to our
Right.
streaming and nix." And again, I don't know if that's exactly how it all works. We're just talking about it
It's
because
complex. There's
that's
a lot of
the
sides to
news.
that
Yeah.
cookie.
But all that to say, that's why it's not in theaters. It's not like, I've seen stuff where it's like, "Oh, they didn't trust that it would do well because look at the history of
Right.
Predator," and maybe that's also partially true. I don't know, yeah. Or like
I know.
connecting it to the
And that
Disney brand and yeah.
I don't. Yes, I see that obviously as people where people are going to go, but I would love to also match that argument with like, but yeah, but there's not been a great movie in this franchise since the first one. So what would that have done? That's always going to be a question. But
Yeah, yeah.
honestly, I'm sitting at the pop that it has now on Monday, going, oh, is it really expanding because of the access? Is it because this has
Right.
been free and it's just there and everybody's on Hulu already? And it was okay. Click on. Oh my God, this is good. Hey, honey, this is really good.
Mhm.
And then by the time now we're talking about it through the week, now people who weren't checking it out are checking it out. I mean, it's the biggest release ever. That
Yeah.
was the access really part of this, and then that's the big question: is like, to what extent does that benefit them? Exactly where did they derive the profit out of something like this? And I guess that's a hot potato going forward. I just read this morning they're developing a series, so
Sure, why not? Yeah. Yeah, makes sense why they would want a series. Also interesting in the news recently, the Batgirl movie was canceled completely after it was
right.
essentially done, which then I mean, this is just all inside baseball about films and TV, but it's why we're talking about why are they doing these things now? Why are they making things based on things? And
Right. So
they
what
just
happened this
decided
weekend
it's done. Yep.
was a really interesting thing. We saw a movie like this get incredible success. Who knew that the Predator movie would be what we're talking about, what we'll be talking about through the next weekend? This all happens in the backdrop while a big regime change happens at Warner Brothers and they drop a done project ready on for its release date. Batgirl just nixed, gone, erased, not happening. It seems to me that Hulu and Disney just completely proved Warner and Discovery Plus wrong in terms of where the focus for these things can be and what I see this as a broadening. Honestly, that I see that the Comanche dub is a big part of this. Is kind of the
Mhm.
nexus of it. This was developed to be in Comanche. It's interesting, and it's not by mistake that it's not that it's in English. And so I think
Yeah.
this what we got has everything to do with where it landed and what it was developed for. Because honestly, I don't think there was any chance that a Comanche version would have been entertained at the theatrical level at all.
Yeah.
At all.
And yeah, and that's kind of also the buzz of people are like, we'll see it for this reason specifically. And so I looked into why is that a big deal? I mean, I know the Comanche tribe and that there's a language and maybe a little bit, but I was like, I was amazed to find out a bit more about it. And then maybe people, if they are sitting on it, will have even more of an
Right.
appreciation for.
They were too afraid to bring the small thing to the big audience.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
said, well, we'll make it for the small screen, do it in a big screen way. And look, oh my God, it found an audience. Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. So the Comanche language is known, maybe some people know it from the code talkers in World War II. 17 young men
Mhm.
using messages for the U.S. Army that couldn't be understood by the Nazis, and that
Yeah.
has been fictionalized and written about quite a bit. The big thing about the language now, and again, this is why this is such a big deal, is there's less than 100 native speakers of the language.
Oh my gosh.
It's it's not, and none of them are under 60. This is going away completely. So the fact that there's a massive
Oh my
feature film, you know
gosh.
what I mean? Like, oh, this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
it's hard to even state it in a way that can grasp the immensity of it to me of being like, oh,
Right.
let's wait. So they consulted the less than 100 people to transcribe
Oh my
this to be
gosh.
able to be spoken, and how many people have seen it now in terms of the awareness of what all of this entails. And the Comanche tribe itself, 16,000 around in terms of population, half of which live in Oklahoma. But the language itself, like I said, a generation apart as a family language, snuffed out because of Native American children being taken to boarding schools and basically having it beaten out of
Mm.
them or
Oh my
not,
god.
all that. So that's why it is so sparse and almost lost. And I'll
Oh my
post a link.
gosh.
There is the Comanche Language and Cultural Preservation Committee, and they have created dictionaries and training DVDs and all sorts of stuff to try and keep it going. But that's why I'm like, oh wow, this movie really has done something quite amazing,
Yeah.
more so than people just like, oh yeah, it's in a Native American language. It's like, no, 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 this is a lot of awareness and a lot of effort put into getting
If you're
this done right.
listening to us and you're going, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, that's cool, Evan and Taylor, but, am I gonna have I have to listen to the whole thing? I don't know."
Yeah.
There's a reason you might should give this a chance. I work in this field, I'm a dub script adapter. I don't have a comparable for what I saw in this. Got back from the screening. I was looking at the film over and over again. The next day, I was looking at the film over and over again. I went to a scene and I wanted to compare the Comanche dub, an emotional moment. I wanted to compare the performance in the Comanche dub with the English dub. The English catches me because the timbre of the voice is the same. And it strikes me. I go to the end of the movie, I look at the dub cast. Incredibly, the two leads, Amber Mid Thunder and Dakota Beavers, are retained in the dub Comanche cast.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
do not have anything like that. This is outside of it being in Comanche and that being incredible. I don't have another piece of media where the where the leads dubbed it in a different language. That's
Right.
always done by different talent. I mean, that's kind of the necessity of it, really. So, what this presents is an incredible backwards opportunity to retain the performances and timing in a way that's almost impossible with a typical dub. That's why you
Mhm.
should give this a chance. Besides all the Comanche stuff, check it out for the Comanche stuff because it's history making. Check it out
Right.
check it on this front because it's actually the best experience possible when it comes to this type of thing. And I kid you not, now going to switch hats onto the writer. Hearing this script and this dialogue performed in that language, hearing phonetically the words I don't understand and connecting it now translated, I think it elevates every moment of this. I think it's absolutely exquisite. We didn't know this was going to explode. Nobody knew this movie was going to be this good. I love this franchise, and I couldn't have dreamed that this movie would be this good. I have problems with it. I have some nitpicks about it, but that's all besides the point. People are loving Predator, and I am happy about it.
Yeah.
Oh
And
my
with
god.
with some of the language stuff that you had brought up in terms of getting it to be equitable, I had even seen, and maybe I'm butchering this translation wise, but just like with anything, like we talked about with our Harry Potter episodes of like, well, when they had to translate the books, there's a lot of euphemisms or Britishisms that have to decide how you're going to put it into Japanese per se. So like with
Yeah.
Comanche, like the phrase "Happy Birthday" in Comanche is more like "We are glad for the day you fell out." There's a
Right,
bit of
right,
a
right.
humor to it. There's so stuff like that where it's like, well, if you're also then going to translate it, you have to look at what, and then Comanche from the 1700s as well, a historical
It,
version of the language.
There's also a couple nuanced moments that I realized that, you wouldn't get unless you were getting the subtitles. In the English version, there are just a couple ends and buttons to phrases, or, there's a beat, a joke in
Mhm.
Comanche. But then they go right back to it's all in English. But they don't subtitle that. So if you're just
Yeah.
watching the English version, you don't know what they just said in Comanche. But if you're watching the
Yeah.
Comanche version, you get the subtitle for it, and it's a great joke in the moment it hits. So I just realized that in comparison between the two, that like, man, the English version is really to compromise no matter which way you cut it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's beautiful. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, if it's a preference, go do what you want. We're just making the case for this. If this is not to, I don't go around watching dubs for, like Christopher Nolan movies and stuff like that. But this is just an incredible opportunity on a few different fronts. It's not just one. It's not just the other. This is all around dynamically pretty incredible opportunity.
Right. The effort was put in from the beginning to try and make it all in this language, so it's worth investing in the experience of it all.
Absolutely. So, and then now backing up off of the dub, I mean, there's so
Yeah.
much more than the language part of this that's so immaculate, and we've already went over a lot of the development. But the Comanche people itself, I mean, from what Jane said, there has never been an attempt to
Yeah.
put their culture on screen as it was like this before. So how does I'm thinking, awesome. How
Yeah.
do I convince people that what they're going to see in this is not just some cowboy movie that they've seen before? No, no, no. You're seeing, yeah. Who do I have to convince now? I had a crazy weekend, but I
Yeah, yeah,
guess I'm still
yeah.
just the Predator apologist, the beaten, the Clippers fan. Just I can't get away from them. I love them.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, then less convincing and more just increasing one's own interest in
You know.
contextualizing it all. Historically, I looked into a little bit, super overview flyby, but like I said, Comanche dominating because of horsemanship and nomadic in a way. There was never a central governance or leadership of everyone broken up into different groups. But in
Hmm.
terms of their scope, by the 1820s, they encompassed an area of about 250,000 square miles in the Great
Wow.
Plains
Yeah.
in the United
Oh my
States,
God.
an empire comparable in size to either France or Afghanistan uh, land mass. So they're the main reason why the West Coast of the United States was settled by white people 40 years before the Great Plains, because the Great Plains, that's kind of the tropes of like, oh, it's the last holdout. And
Right.
what a lot of the Western type movies are prejudicially talking about is, oh, we've got to stop the
The
Comanche
spread.
tribe. And it's like, well, because they were already so dominant, and this was with the horseback riding as well, heavily reliant on buffalo. Like I said, as nomadic
Right.
hunters, raiders, and traders. But then as the buffalo are being slaughtered in mass, being shot and destroyed, and all of that, it's like, well, what else can you do? Now
Which is a
you're yeah.
fascinating misdirect in the film. If anybody is confused, is the predator didn't skin all the buffalo, the trappers did.
Right. Right. So that's the start of that, but you can see where then the historical stuff fits in. And also they call themselves, and I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but Numunu, which means just in
Bear
their
with us.
in their language, the people, because you wouldn't call you're just the people.
Mm,
But Comanche is a Spanish corruption of another Native American tribe word, which translated to those who are against us or simply the enemy. So
well,
everybody
oh,
is calling them now, like their name literally means it's from another
oh God.
tribe's description of them as
It's like
the enemy.
it's like we've been calling them them or they.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So again, that's looking at the historical stuff. Oh, making a
Gosh.
movie from their perspective. That's
Yeah.
also why it's important. So then I looked into, well, are there any other films that are even remotely close to this? In not even just
Right.
in time span, but in perspective. So
I mean, she said there's never been an attempt to commit the culture to film like
yeah.
this. So I was like, really? Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, different. I'm
So the
learning. I'm learning.
the two different corollaries for different reasons. The first one is more of a profile on a person. This guy James Young Deere, who had made 150, or so they say, silent westerns for this French studio, and not
Mm.
many of them, there's one that definitely has survived. The thing that he did, his films depict Native Americans as heroes, interracial marriages. They're
Yeah.
constructing their own lives in spite of the white man taking over. And so that's a big deal for silent westerns of that time
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
He has, I'll post a link to it, but it's so much ambiguity in relation to his origins and whereabouts thereafter and scandals. And some people are like, was he just a con man? Is he a charlatan? Was he even Native American?
Uh,
It's all
really?
lost to the ambiguities of silent film history, and because hardly any of them are surviving. But in terms of what we do know about what he was doing, it was quite different for the time in
Yeah.
terms of representation. So that's number one. The other one
Okay.
is a film called The Daughter of Dawn, a 1920 silent Western film. And similar to this one, it is maybe the only Western like this ever made with an entirely Native American cast. 300 people from
Wow.
the Comanche tribe. This
Really?
is, yeah. In terms of the representation, though, it is more of a docudrama romanticizing their culture and lifestyle. So it's not quite
Right. Right. Right.
it was presumed lost. And so this is where the new news comes in, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay.
So how it was found, always wild. In 2005, there was a private investigator who was paid for a job with this film instead of cash. And he said, okay, he's got the
Okay.
reels. And then they found, he had it in his garage for years. And then I guess,
Wow.
the Oklahoma
No
Historical
way.
Society, they said, we'll buy it from you for a couple $1,000 and then restored it. And now,
Oh my
uh,
God.
you can
It's a
see it on
miracle.
a stream. Yeah, yeah.
It's a
But
the bona fide miracle.
yeah. But in terms of like, God, what else is comparable? Some docudrama from the 1920s that was almost lost for 100 years. Like, uh,
Right.
that's all we got, you know?
Right.
So that led me to our last little bit, which is you had mentioned kind of how the subtitles, if you do watch it in Comanche, provide actual cultural context that
Yeah.
enriches the experience. There's a little piece that was hard to find in terms of the research of like these little cultural idiomatic things, but there is a bit, and this isn't a spoiler for anything, but when the main character summons the predator after setting up this frontiersman as a trap, there's a little moment
Yes.
where she whistles to direct the predator's attention. And if you
Yeah,
were
it almost
watching,
sounds like
yeah,
it almost sounds like the Hunger Games whistle or something.
yeah. So this was hugely controversial. If you were watching this with a Native American audience, everybody would be like, "What the hell is going on?" So this is hugely culturally taboo. Whistling at night is said to summon evil spirits. It's across all sorts of cultures, even not just Native American.
Oh my
But
God.
this is a huge deal. So Amber refused to do this. They had on set, they had a non-native crew member do it because nobody wanted to do it. This is like a horrible, horrible thing. And this is something that Jane Myers suggested when they were filming because it's not in the script. Because it's like
Yes, yes, yes. I'm sitting here going like, that's great that Patrick can dig that deep into these things, but I'm like, I want it to be Jane saying, this is pushing the boundary
Mhm.
and it's culturally rich, and
Yeah.
thank God, and
Yeah.
because Amber doesn't want to do it. That's speaking to how strong it is.
Yeah. Well, and it's also
As a producer, as a
yeah.
filmmaker, as a creative, incredible, incredible.
Yeah, Amber said her mom was, like, mad at her when they watched it. She's like, "No, no, no, I didn't do it. It was somebody else." Because this is
Incredible.
the character's turning point. It's like, that's how fed up she is. She is
Yes,
willing, and
yes,
it's relevant to the story because the predator is literally an evil spirit that she's trying to
yes.
summon.
Yes,
It
and
works. Yeah.
who she's sicking it on immediately calls it a demon,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's classically comes up through the franchise. So like it's completely in line, and she part of her monologue there is, "You won't see that I'm killing you, and neither will it." Using it to direct
Yeah.
it down, incredible.
So I hope I wasn't butchering the cultural context for that. I tried to, from what I read of what they said, the reason behind the whistling, That's what I
No.
understood it to be,
I
but definitely it was
I
a
read it
thing
in
that
the movie
yeah.
as just, she's just making a sound to direct its
Right.
attention apart from him, whatever the
And that's
French
how
guy is saying.
everybody
So
that's how everybody
that's
would
how
have
you read it.
interpreted it.
That's how it goes
Yeah.
over. If you're Comanche, you're ripping your eyes out. You're, oh my
Yeah.
God. Oh, what a treat.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been so full. Like I'm leaving church. My heart is
Yeah, yeah,
full
yeah.
this week. This whole week, I've just been so full. This has been such a delight. This is the movie I never thought would come. If you were with us last week, I said I've been thinking about this movie basically my entire life. And I would love it to be almost like a Black Mirror anthology, different place, different setting, different warrior,
culture, yeah.
different reason. Exactly. And that's what he's always supposed to be. That's part of why we did the two-parter here, is to, especially in the first half, to picking apart. It's the ultimate matchup. That's what he's designed to be. So the last 30 years, I don't know where we've been not matching him up against cool human characters, real human characters with needs and wants and with an emotional story. Since the moment that pistol was handed over in Predator 2, I've been going, where are we going next, man? Who's the next warrior? What's the next and we just, I guess I'd given up on that dream. I got to go on that trip this weekend, and man, people are enjoying it with me. Everybody's crazy over it. Thank you, Taylor, for digging into this. This has been such a joy. Thank you guys for sticking with us. If you're still listening to my crackly little voice, man, just stick with us. Let us know what you're reading. Reach out to us if there's ever anything you want us to look into. You never know when we'll do an episode about that thing you want to know all about.
You can reach out at ILLITERATEPOD on Instagram or illiteratepod@gmail.com. Again, let us know what you'd like us to cover in the coming weeks and months. We're definitely going to be doing Lord of the Rings, since that is the biggest
much
thing.
Requested. If you're going to go and request that, it's on the list, baby. It's coming. Please. This show is a blast, and we love bringing out all these little things that drive this material. So until we get to meet up and do it again next week, stay safe. We'll talk at you then.